There are two main components to a French onion soup. Those are properly cooked onions and a good broth. So in this video, I'll show you how I do both of those steps so you can nail French onion soup. First up are the onions, and I'll need 3 pounds of onions. And they just happen to sell a bag that holds exactly 3 pounds. These are yellow onions, but you can use any onions you already have. Some people also mix up their onions to give their soup a bit more depth, but this will work for us. We will also need some butter, and we are using unsalted butter for this since we want to control the salt level in the final soup. And then we have a choice of either beef stock or chicken stock for this recipe, and I'm going to use a combination of the two. I've read that you should only use beef stock if you make your own, but I will use this one and then boost the flavor a little bit with better than bouillon as well. And another major flavor in the soup is wine. A lot of recipes use sherry and it works well, but I also like the flavor of Chinese rice wine too, and if you have that, maybe you can use it instead. And then to add a little bit more depth of flavor, we'll either add some soy sauce or fish sauce. I also like the flavor of Worcestershire sauce as well. And then for the herbs, I'll be using some thyme and then also a bay leaf. And then to finish, we'll need some bread, garlic, and cheese. I'm using Gruyere here, but you can also use mozzarella or Parmesan as well. So now that we've gone over all the main ingredients, let's slice up our onions. To slice these up, there are a few options. We're going to keep it simple and just use our knife. And as long as you end up with slices that are all about the same thickness, you can either slice them top to bottom or from the sides like this. And here's the thickness that you're going for. I'm also noticing that the knife seems to be a little slow going through the onions, so I'll probably need to sharpen my knife soon. Maybe I'll make a video on how I sharpen my knives next. Let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in seeing. But if you don't want to slice these up by hand, you can also use a food processor with a slicing blade, or even a mandolin if you have one as well. But if you notice, the onions will stick to my blade when I chop, but if I slice through the onions like this, it's a little bit faster because the onions don't stick to the knife as bad. And all in, this took me about 10 minutes to get these sliced up. Now here's really the heart of the soup, and so this is going to be the part that takes the most time. If you nail the onions, you're well on your way. And what we're looking for is a really good caramelization and making sure that we don't burn them. So we'll start off by getting our Dutch oven onto medium heat with some butter. And I really wish that I had a flat bottom spoon, since it scrapes the bottom a lot better than this one, but this will work too. And once that's melted and started to bubble, we'll add in all of our onions. We'll also add in a little bit of salt to start pulling out some of the moisture, and it'll help break them down too. And once we get everything heated up, we'll drop the heat to low so we don't cook them too quickly. So now they've been cooking for about 5 minutes, and you can see they're starting to soften just a little bit. No browning or no color yet, but everything's starting to soften and they're starting to push down just a little bit. So about every 5-10 minutes, I'm going to come in and just stir them, break them up a little bit, make sure nothing's browning too much at the bottom. But at this point, it's just kind of keeping them moving. So you can see some of these are already starting to soften quite a bit and go a little bit translucent. So I'll just keep cooking these on low heat until we start to get some more color. But I'll keep checking on them about every 5 minutes or so. And to get great onions, you have to be patient and let them cook. This step is tedious, but is totally worth it in the end. For me, this took about an hour and a half of slowly cooking them while scraping up any brown bits that started to form as I cooked them. I would check on them every so often, so I wasn't standing here stirring the whole time, but you want to keep a close eye on them. I've also heard people like to do this step in a crock pot to avoid stirring, but I haven't tried it. And what we're going for in this caramelization step is not burning or heavy browning. If we go too far in this step, we'll end up with a bitter or burnt flavored soup, and no amount of melted cheese will cover that up, unfortunately. Here you can see them slowly starting to brown and turning a beautiful caramel color as well as the sugars begin to cook. And I'm taking these shots about every 20 minutes or so, and you can really tell the color changing at each stop. When they're done cooking, they'll look something like this. They'll turn soft and have this wonderful brown color and will smell so sweet and delicious. And just before they're done, I'm going to add in my thyme so that way it has a chance to cook with the onions a bit before I add everything else in. And that'll really help to pull out the flavor since we're not using fresh thyme. So I'll let this cook together for a couple minutes while stirring. And now is when I'll boost the beef flavor too. So I'll stir in a little bit of beef bouillon and let that cook for just a minute. And now that we have that in, we're going to stop the cooking by adding in some of our liquids. And here you have a few options like I mentioned before. For me, I'm going to be using sherry wine because I had it, and it has a unique sweetness and acid combination. But again, if you don't have sherry, you could also use the Chinese cooking wine or a nice acidic white wine as well. Here I'm also going to add in some pepper and a bay leaf as well. And I'll let this cook for a minute so I can cook off the alcohol before I add in the stock. And like I mentioned before, I'm going to be using a combination of beef and chicken stock, since that's what I had on hand, but you can use what you have. And now we'll bring this up to a simmer on medium-high heat. And once we get it to that point, we'll drop the heat down to low, and we'll let it cook for about 20 minutes or so that way we can pull out the flavor of the herbs and let the flavors start to meld together. Once this 20 minutes is up, we'll have our base soup ready, and now we just need to start adjusting to the flavors that we like. If you want a deeper or richer flavor, you can add in some fish sauce or soy sauce. But if you want to highlight the sweetness and the acid a bit more, you could add in some cider vinegar here as well. You'll also want to adjust any salt and pepper that you need in this step too. Here I'm going to be adding just a bit more salt and pepper, and then also some of the Worcestershire sauce as well, since that has a little bit of the deep flavor, but also a little bit of sweetness too. Now that we have this where I want it, we'll just let this simmer for a few minutes while I prep the bread and cheese. The first step is to turn on your broiler and to get it ready. And then we'll cut up the bread, and I'm going to be using a French baguette that I had, so I'm just going to cut that up into slices. Once I have it sliced up, I'll put a little bit of oil on it and toast one side under the broiler for just a minute or so while keeping an eye on it. And we aren't looking for a full toasting, just looking to crisp up one side. Once that has the color I like, I'll take a garlic clove and rub it over the toasted side and set it aside while I work on the cheese. And most recipes will call for Gruyere cheese, and I've used mozzarella in the past too, and it's a good melting cheese, but it just doesn't have the same saltiness as Gruyere. And then for me, I found that if I use one of these food containers and lean the grater on its side, I'm able to grate the cheese pretty easily while containing the cheese at the same time. And then to bring everything together, first we'll ladle in some soup into the bottom of the crock, if you have one, and then I'll add in one of the pieces of bread and some cheese, and then I top that with more soup. I think the bread is one of the best parts, so I like to add a little bit of extra. And then we'll add a couple more pieces on top with a decent pile of cheese as well. Then this will go into the broiler again until you get some nice browning on top. And if you don't have oven-safe bowls, you can just put your bread on a sheet pan, cover it with the cheese, and then put that under the broiler too. And then I like to top mine with a few chives for a little bit of color and a little bit more onion flavor. And there you have it, a delicious French onion soup. I hope you give this a try, and if you do, let me know how it turned out. And I'll link to the full recipe as well below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.